comes down to computers communicating.
The information superhighway can be a confusing mix of on-ramps and off-ramps.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold.
Is it still rat poison?
Probably rat poison squared.
We need to get into the world of, okay, this is actually foundational technology.
What the Internet of Money does is it creates a single network which can do a microtransaction to a gigatransaction.
The Internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash.
Alrighty, welcome back to Final Settlement. Today is June 2nd, 2025. Today on the show, I'm joined by my co-hosts Liam and Michael, and a very special guest, Pierre Corbin, CEO and co-founder of Flash, portfolio company of early riders. Very glad to have Pierre back on the show. How you doing, sir?
Hey, yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back here. Doing really good.
Still recovering from your Vegas trip, I would imagine.
Yes.
Jet lagged, perhaps?
Jet lag, can't sleep all night only. And it's horrible because, so I live in Poland, right? And sunrise is at about 4 a.m. So going to sleep because of jet lag when it's already day out is makes it just harder. But yeah, I think recovering slowly.
Guys, yeah. I think I figured out the hack is, so for next year, we probably don't go to the conference again, especially because it's in Vegas, but we have folks on from that were in Vegas right after, and then the following week to recap and talk, because we had this really great recap with Tim on Thursday that came out Friday, and the comments were really helpful or insightful in that they like to be able to recap it and not necessarily have to go through the travel. So Pierre, if you're going to be there, maybe we'll have you on a year from now and we'll recap what the latest is going on.
Sure. Happy to.
So yeah, maybe diving in there, logical place to start. Pierre, was it your first time in Vegas, or have you been there before?
No, first time in Vegas. It's a very, very funny place. Feels like just a resort all around. I was surprised that there's over 2 million people living there. That's crazy. But it did remind me quite a bit of Dubai, to be fair. And I spent quite a bit of time in Dubai. Yeah, I mean, it was just more of a pure holiday vibes, whereas Dubai is more real life as well.
Yeah. So what any sort of key takeaways from the week, discussions you had, any alpha you want to leak, different conversations with folks?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, it is a lot of what at least my feed shows on Twitter when it comes to the conference. A lot of as we call shitcoining, not just Bitcoin focused topics. Which, I mean, is fine, I guess. There's a bit of everything, at least it brings people over to these topics. But, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, everyone has the opinion that, of course, Bitcoin won. And I agree that Bitcoin won. I even talked, with so he's an old friend. He's called Plamen, and he's the person that leads the Bitcoin community in Bulgaria. And he said that he feels missionless, without a mission anymore, because Bitcoin kind of won, and you can really get this vibe at the conference. But I think what matters is not Bitcoin that now the U.S. government is trying to push, because this is all full custody Bitcoin. Let's not forget what Bitcoin is actually trying to solve, which is the fact that you can be responsible of your own money and not be dependent on a third party, which is what both. I mean, us together, early riders, Onramp, Flash, we're working on, of course. So yeah, I was there a lot trying to push people as to, yes, wait, but this isn't real Bitcoin. This is just the equivalent of the traditional financial system on a new asset class. But let's not lose the mission here. I feel the conference is a bit all over the place when it comes to that.
Yeah.
It's a little unfortunate. I don't know who you referenced, but who said that, because it kind of reminds me, and bear with me, it's like the parallel. When people say, if you're depressed, just go help somebody else out. Like if somebody's depressed, they're thinking about themselves too much versus you just go out in the world and then that'll go away. It's very similar to like that notion. It's like maybe it's figured out for the individual, but when you think about from store of value for 8 billion people or payments that we talk about and being able to receive across the world, there's still like an insane amount of work to be done. And then one of the things that stood out, I think it wasn't until after the conference, and I think it was Jack's mom, Brooke Mullers. I think she had a tweet that was showing the 2000 or 10 years ago, whatever that was, 2015, with Antonopoulos sitting in Texas blockchain or Texas Bitcoin conference. And he said 10 years from now, there will be 30 to 50,000 people, similar how the internet was. And it was kind of prescient that that stood out there. The only other thing to share about the Vegas stuff, I guess it makes sense from a continuity perspective, because we've all been to like Miami and Nashville, and the crazy amount of logistics and travel versus being able to be in a like consolidated area, definitely helps. And I think the infrastructure from Vegas, independent of kind of the fiat vibes, that it reels off.
I think it's
one
just
thought. Or go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, it's just really big, and to be fair, it was very well organized, right? So I think being able to organize something at such a big scale is quite impressive. I mean, I didn't attend J.D. Vance's talk. I didn't feel like lining up at 5:30 a.m. But I hear it was very packed. I did arrive right afterwards, and just as everyone was exiting the main room, it was pretty crazy. No, so organization was on point though, that's for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, well, maybe there was a few sort of announcements. It's funny because there was, obviously a lot of focus and talk about Bitcoin treasury companies and, mostly looking at Bitcoin as a store of value reserve asset. And I think that's also been a lot of the rhetoric from, the JD Vances of the world, the government policymakers, the way they're looking at Bitcoin. But at the same time, there was also, a number of announcements and progress and development on the payment side of things, and that's sort of where you spend most of your time focused, Pierre. I'm curious what you made of some of the announcements on that side of things. Square had a few announcements around rolling out, accepting payments for all of their merchant terminals. There was another very interesting announcement around some of the work that they're doing on Lightning specifically in their routing node that's generating a 9.7% annual yield. Curious what you made of some of the medium of exchange type announcements that happened, which I think given the crowd there, very TradFi focused, probably some of it got lost in the sense that there is all of this focus on Bitcoin treasury companies and as you put it, not real Bitcoin. So curious what you made of all that.
Yeah, so I think definitely the announcements by Square, at least to me, were the most relevant, the most important ones. Because, everything else we've kind of already heard before. Having a strategic Bitcoin reserve is kind of the thing to do right now, which is just interesting to observe. And I feel it becomes less and less, mind-blowing compared to when MicroStrategy started doing it. It just feels like a very trendy thing. And it even kind of gives the vibe of this is, it could be an event around this that will point to the end of the Bitcoin bull run, which would be kind of, just speculating here, but And, but essentially, I think there's two things around payments that I think are pretty interesting. First of all, when it comes to Square, I think the fact that they're now integrating Lightning payments for all of their merchants, this is just amazing. Simply because, of course, it makes the Lightning Network more accessible. All of these merchants are now people that will also have direct access to Bitcoin. This will, of course, encourage more people to spend in Bitcoin. And I think this is generally good news all around and for the entire industry and for the payments industry as well. A lot of the feedback that we get is that most people, when they buy Bitcoin, they first go on some Coinbase, and then as they get educated, they go and look for other options that can protect their funds better. Like I suppose that's also how it works with Onramp. And the same thing is true with payments, right? A lot of people, they start with the basic ones the big names that everyone understands. But then as they get more educated and some data sometimes is leaked here and there, some funds are lost here and there, they kind of want to start looking at other options. And this is where, Flash is a very logical next step for such companies. So, I think generally speaking, Square accepting Lightning payments, that's very, very welcome. Now, another one that I think is pretty interesting is the fact that there are a lot of payment solutions out there that are not like Square. Square is, fully regulated, fully follows all of the regulations that are needed when it comes to custodying, KYC, anti-money laundering, processes, all of this. And there are a lot in the space that are custodians and do not do that. And it's just interesting to observe, and kind of raises the question, what's going to happen next? I know, Steak and Shake, for example, they were at the conference as well. They had a booth. They're using a competitor of ours that is based out of Dubai. They don't KYC, they don't AML. It's a big question mark as to how long they're going to be able to run this business this way with U.S. customers, given the regulations that are coming. I mean, of course, at this stage, regulations in the U.S., the only thing we know of is the Genius Act, that at this stage only regulates stablecoins, but oftentimes shows how the rest of the industry will be regulated, which I think is the logical way of approaching it. If you're a custodian, you need to have custodian processes, which makes sense because you're a risk for individuals. And so, with all of this knowledge and seeing all these businesses that are accepting payments through these rails, sure, it's easier. And sure, they're good options, but as these regulations come into play, I think this environment can change for them as well. Which, from Flash's perspective, just strengthens exactly what we're doing, because the whole goal is no intermediaries and not having to rely on other custodians where it's not needed, essentially. And I think payment is not needed when it comes to holding custody of users' funds. Rather, custody of users' funds is not needed in the payment space.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe you have some reactions when it comes to that. I do have some extra thoughts when it comes to the whole Lightning Network thing of Square. But,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really bullish too, just because we've really seen a ton of focus on Bitcoin treasury companies, but this is really great for just like companies that want a Bitcoin treasury, and it doesn't need to necessarily be the full focus of their entire company. But like to Michael's point earlier, like Bitcoin is not like some like very fringe idea where nobody understands, if it has any value at all. It's just now I guess maybe phase 2 of like how to optimize your exposure to it, of how to optimize payments, what to do as like a company if you want to integrate it into your business. Do you hold it? Do you just it seems like Steak and Shake maybe just goes the route of liquidating it, and that's the option that Square gives you once you accept it for payment. But even with that, there are many times going to be reduced fees and quicker settlement. I don't know exactly what Square is going to offer like that, but it seems like that's just significantly better than the merchant side. And it does just give additional exposure and, education from very well-respected players who can allow for different exposure from a number of different people. So, I don't see how this is anything but really exciting for a number of different, aspects. And that's kind of before we even touch on the routing side.
Yeah. So just a note, Steak and Shake, they're not using Square though. Steak and Shake uses Speed.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm. So I was going to bring up Pierre. I hear the notion of the non-custodial, and I think there's a delicate balance because let's say it's Steak and Shake or whoever, and they don't know who their counterparty is, and they use the easiest route, and then they get rugged. Whether they get rugged because of regulation or they get rugged because wherever their custodial wallet is. The problem with that is, independent if we agree if it's right or wrong, like that's the easy route, and it's the tooling that vertically integrates to make it very simple. In the same way Square, you log in, you have a bank account, it accepts it to it, the payments, and then it sweeps and takes the fee, and it's pretty straightforward. It gives you some invoicing and other tooling. So how do you think about that experience? Because there's some part component of value add that you can bring your own custody setup, and there's the other part where the vast majority of people won't want to think about that. They'll naturally either want to bring in the Bitcoin, auto convert, or sweep into a robust custody solution, looking at their partner that they're using it as their source of truth or kind of advocate to come into the space. Like, how do you think about that ease of access and the delicate balance?
Yeah, I think because I don't have any problem with custody. In fact, I think custody is very welcome when it comes to holding funds, and especially I like the more hybrid models with like multi-institution custody like you guys offer. But it's really when I say that custody is something that shouldn't happen, it's in the payment side of things. We don't need an intermediary when it comes to actually facilitating payments, right? This is what we're working at solving at Flash. So it's really when it comes to that. Now, at this stage, well, we know we have the technology and we're developing the use cases for it. It's really more a matter of making sure that these custodial solutions can plug into these environments more easily in order to facilitate the non-custodial payments. But just to simplify the non-custodial part, it's really about no intermediaries, right? Because there can be custody on both sides of where the Bitcoin comes from and where it's going. It's just that in this transaction there shouldn't be an intermediary because the tech allows us to do it. I mean, after all, the white paper is about peer-to-peer electronic cash systems. So it's about making sure that we remove these intermediaries in the payment. Because I think for new people coming into the space, it makes perfect sense to look for custodial solutions that have, for just more secure solutions, not relying on your own individual security when you may not be familiar with all of these processes and the right way of doing it. I know that the first time as an individual that I took proper custody of my funds, that was an entire first step to take, right? And it's not an easy one because it makes you feel very responsible all of a sudden. And it's also counterintuitive because the concept of custody doesn't really exist outside of the world of Bitcoin or, even thinking more wider crypto, because everyone is just so used to custody and everything that is payments and holding your money in a bank account. So that's why, I maybe prefer just saying no intermediaries when it comes to the payment side of things. And essentially, yeah, I think, when it comes to Square, it's easier. If you come to Tri-Speed, it's easier. Although, Tri-Speed, again, I think is easier because they don't require KYC and they don't have all of these processes because we're still in this gray area of regulation. Square, of course, does require all of this. And many businesses are fine with that, which makes sense. And Square are a custodian, temporary custodian of these payments and allowed to, directly either off-ramp or just also hold it in Bitcoin directly through their other services, which is interesting to see. They did part of Block. They did release BitKey, which is a hardware wallet. But that is, I think, the next step will be how do they integrate this nicely in the rest of their tools. Yeah.
BitKey, we don't ever get to talk about BitKey. We don't have to do it here, but I just nobody talks about it in the lexicon or like in the Twitter space because there's a lot of people spouting. None of those people have ever onboarded thousands of people and like real significant capital. And what that product is pure too much money and too many smart people sitting in a room ideating on what the market wants versus building it. Like that's fundamental to the thing. It's like it's for nobody when you really break it down because everyone will say it's for somebody else or their grandparents or whatever. It's like if it's for your grandparents and they're going to put significant wealth and they don't understand it and you can't recover, like how much wealth would you put? And if it's not for the hardcore person, like who is it for? It's for really nobody. And nobody really says that because they've never had to sit on calls and walk people through and the dongles and the recovery and the questions that are asked. No serious person is putting significant capital on a BitKey multi-sig setup. So then it's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. So I personally didn't use BitKey. I did hear many people say that it's the hardware wallet that they think is the easiest to use and so on. But I don't know. Personally, I didn't use it myself. It's got a nice design, I guess. But yeah, it
there's
feels.
No screen. There's no screen.
Yeah, there's no screen. Yeah. I agree. But of course, the point is for you to be able to use it through their app, right? It's just there as an external signing device. But I don't know. It doesn't feel.
The fascinating part is like we stay so close to the space. The past 2 weeks, it just came out. Ledger Live had a malicious, software download, whatever. Like So how, like, they're not going to come up with a different app or a side load? Like, you can get somebody's phone overnight, swap out the app, and then sign. Like, there's so many different attack vectors if you aren't able to see it from an external device.
Yeah.
Which goes back to then it's just for fun, and if it's just for fun, just put it on a single, say, cold card and call it a day.
Yeah, no,
it's more secure, and you can see it. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, in the end, you have to be able to validate, including from the device, that you're sending to the right address as expected. Because yes, the attack vectors, if you don't see all of a sudden, I mean, yeah, you can really get trapped easily.
Maybe just circling back to the payment side of things, and for maybe folks in the audience who haven't heard about Flash specifically, Pierre, maybe if you could give sort of just a brief overview of what Flash does, and then I'll pull up this write-up in Bitcoin Mag from a couple weeks ago, and maybe just talk through some of the things you guys are working on with Flash 2.0 and sort of the roadmap in general.
Yeah, sure. So essentially at Flash, what we found is that there's really good technology at the protocol level that allows us to interact with wallets in a pretty novel way that unlocks a couple new features that didn't exist in Bitcoin until now. One of them is direct debit, essentially, where we can just easily interact with wallets. So we have a set of different tools, for content creators, for in-person commerce, for e-commerce, platforms such as subscriptions, so automatic recurring payments, and all of these features, and actually invoicing too. We just launched invoicing last week, I believe, and we're going to be pushing this some more as well. So every single tool that we have is just through basic communication with the user wallet, and allows us to make sure that we are not an intermediary in the payment, which means that there's no KYC, it's free to get started, and essentially, it's we believe the easiest and fastest option to get started with Bitcoin payments. Again, with this, the truly revolutionary side that we are trying to push is the fact that if you are a payment processor, you no longer need to hold custody of merchants' funds. We can just facilitate these peer-to-peer transactions, which of course reduces the time transactions end up in the merchant's pocket, the fees that merchants have to pay, as well as the general user experience that it is to get started. So that's kind of what we're up to, and we have very big set of tools. And the more recent one that we want to push is invoicing. Now, of course, in the traditional fiat world, invoicing tools are usually free, and so that's how we're going to be releasing also our invoicing. So starting next week, it'll be completely free for any freelancer to come over Flash and over to Flash, create invoices, send them to their employer for whatever kind of job they're doing. And we won't take any transactions fee for that. This will just depend on the network fees and what wallets you use. Right. So we also have a wallet that is right now in beta, so it's still in test flight. And next month, we hope to be able to release it on the app stores. So full self-custodial. Again, we do not want to hold anyone's money, touch anyone's money, whether the wallet that they earn to, or even how they earn in this flow of payments. Right.
Yeah, it's an insane tool set. Or there's a lot of tooling and a lot that's been added. I was looking over yesterday. Curious, Pierre, like how would you? Is it a fair categorization? There's like two parts to the business in the sense that there's like merchant tooling. Somebody can onboard, get access to these robust different tool sets for integration into like WooCommerce, Shopify, and then create the invoice naturally, figure out, curious on like exactly the flow around custody. Cause that's still the thing that I like harp on is if there's not a direct version of what they can do that's robust, that's a point of friction in my mind. But then the second part is around Nostr Wallet Connect and bringing a whole layer of other native aspects to payments that have historically not been there when it comes to subscriptions and pooling. And is that fair to separate them? Or I know they merge in some respects, but I feel like they kind of have two different either use cases or areas of your business that are like from a technology stack.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, at the heart of it all is always Nostr Wallet Connect because this is the tech that we use to be able to interact with wallets. Now, if you think of it in the most basic way, it's just a shared API among all compatible wallets, which is now becoming quite the standard as most new Lightning wallets are releasing with Nostr Wallet Connect integration. And essentially it allows it to directly communicate with the wallet. So how it works is whatever checkout you have, so it can be our e-commerce checkout, for example, well then the customer is redirected to our hosted checkout page, and there we will show a Lightning QR code, so a payment request. We're about also to release also support for on-chain payments, so that'll be both on-chain and Lightning paid to the same wallet, and essentially these payment requests that appear on screen are generated by the merchant wallet directly. So it is not a payment that goes to one of our wallets and we redirect. It's a payment that will go directly to the merchant, which increases a lot of security for the merchant and also allows to create this direct relationship, in fact, between the customer and the brands they're buying products from. And this is true for everything. Now, one thing where we're also making a lot of changes thanks to Nostr Wallet Connect is through backend payments. So if you think of traditional payments in the Bitcoin space, there's usually a QR code and you have to scan the QR code from your phone and you have to confirm the transaction, and this is how the funds are sent. Well, Nostr Wallet Connect allows us to manage a lot of this in the backend, and this is how we do it with subscriptions. So subscriptions is two-sided. There's the side that is the merchant side, which of course, in the end, the tool that we have is for merchants to be able to monetize through automatic recurring payments, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. We have a bunch of options there. And then, of course, there's the consumer side, which is how customers can subscribe to these platforms, right? And when it comes to the flow of payments in that case, essentially, we do the exact same thing, except that we communicate using Nostr Wallet Connect in our backend. So the exact user flow is he arrives on our subscription checkout page. He chooses his plan, depending on what the merchant set up. And when he chose his plan, he needs to verify his email address, pretty basic kind of 2FA. And then instead of scanning a QR code to make a payment, he has to connect his wallet. And in connecting his wallet, we create a connection that we store that has a set budget. We cannot charge more than what the user authorized us to charge. And then from in our backend, we will generate a Lightning payment request from the merchant wallet. The user never sees it. And then using the Nostr Wallet connection of the customer, we're going to pay that invoice that was generated by the merchant. So we're also facilitating a peer-to-peer transaction, but the actual transaction doesn't happen in the front end. It is purely in the back end. And then, of course, how do we get paid in the process is leveraging the same direct debit approach. Is after the merchant got paid, well, then we can trigger a payment from his wallet to ours. And so the flow is the same, is rather than interacting with the merchant wallet directly, we interact with the Flash wallet. We generate a payment request, and then we get the merchant to pay this in the backend, right? So there's two backend payments that happen, allowing us to not be an intermediary in the flow of funds. We really just take a service fee because all of this happened through our platform, which is, I think, the way forward. Of course, for payment processors, because it is so easy to do and is instant now compared to the fact that it was impossible up until now. Now it has just become, well, not necessarily easy, I'm not going to lie, but it became possible at least. And so we're unlocking these use cases. And I think it goes beyond just subscription, it goes beyond merchants. I think it can go to all kind of peer-to-peer payments in any platform. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing little by little.
Yeah, let's talk about some of like your interesting. It can even be like moonshots, but to back into that, where you're thinking where it can go is you reference had been historically impossible. So the first thing my mind went to anybody listening or here is like if you don't use was it like Molvad and some of the VPN providers that require Bitcoin payments, you generally end up like tapping out unless you're going to, if you're going to pay in Bitcoin, because every month you have to reset it, or you can pay for like 3 months. But then my mind went to, well, what other use cases or globally that somebody wants to accept Bitcoin on a reoccurring basis and that they never did. So they either just didn't offer to a segment of the market or never opened up Bitcoin, because you would imagine you probably lose, a conversion rate if somebody goes in, signs up for Bitcoin for 1 month, and then you never see them again because they just didn't. That's what would happen with me with multiple VPN providers. But then it kind of ties into this notion we've talked about a little bit before of it's like the growth of the internet was around like Metcalfe's law, which is the Ethernet or like amount of connectivity, and then Moore's law, which is lowering the cost of semiconductors and just technology. And those together is what kind of created the modern day kind of like proliferation of technology. And then if you take that to where we're at today, it's AI and Bitcoin, where AI is the version of Moore's law. You can do more with less. And then Bitcoin is, the Metcalfe's law. You're able to, basically connect everyone that hadn't been. So you take all those together, and this is what kind of leads to what are some interesting examples of, whether it's what you were referencing with Nostr Wallet connecting the connectivity that just hadn't been done before, or it's not even that haven't been done before. It's like just opens up more of a market where somebody could have been in Poland and only offered there because they couldn't get a U.S. bank account or couldn't offer their goods and services or technology stack to U.S. citizens, Latin America, now just completely change. What are you seeing or thinking about?
Yeah, so I think the use cases can go really quite crazy moving forward, because Nostr Wallet Connect, of course, makes these things easier and more interoperable. Especially, I think this is the more important part, is the fact that it's interoperable, and of course can allow the automation of payments in self-custody, so without intermediaries, which means it removes friction of needing KYC on a bunch of platforms and so on. But also it's microtransactions, right? So the fee that we take, if someone is selling a product that is $1 worth, well, we can still capture a fee because we're talking of microtransactions, and I think this is the concept that can scale really big time. So I guess we must have spoken about that. So Flash was a spin-off of a previous project that we were working on called Nostr Eggs originally. A horrible name. But essentially what we were working on was leveraging AI, Nostr, and Lightning payments. And the way we did that was essentially, and we had created an entire chatbot that was built off of that, where for each API request that was done, we would then send a Lightning invoice through an SDK, and then a backend payment would happen directly, and the response of that API would be sent only if the Lightning invoice was paid. And this is in fact how we started really using Nostr Wallet Connect, and when we realized the power of it, because all of a sudden, we were originally using two technologies in the Lightning space of Lightning addresses and Nostr Wallet Connect. We had them both together, and the Lightning addresses issue as a platform that is trying to coordinate payments is that there is no way for you to capture a fee without taking custody of users' funds, right? And this is when we realized actually we solved this problem with Nostr Wallet Connect. And the week we released Nostr Eggs, we also thought we should change, and this is when we should move on to Flash. But that's also when I told my co-founder, okay, but I think right here is the moment where you should take the decision of moving away from Lightning addresses and focus only on Nostr Wallet Connect, because that's the only real way to take a fee for every single transaction that we can simplify the flow for without ever holding custody of users' funds, right? And so if we were to recreate this entire API payments platform, which we do plan on recreating, then we would do it using Nostr Wallet Connect because it is so much easier. In fact, and I don't want to get too technical either, but there's this big project called L402 that is essentially doing that, created by Lightning Labs. And I think it's just a complicated way of doing it. You have to lock up some Bitcoin and give temporary access to a third party so that he can just take this Bitcoin whenever he needs from this locked up Bitcoin, essentially. It's not what I consider a direct debit kind of way of working. And I think the way forward is through this direct debit feature that Nostr Wallet Connect enables without needing to lock up some Bitcoin. Because, I don't know, if I'm using a certain API and sure, I know that there's X amount of transactions that are going to happen, I don't necessarily want to lock up more Bitcoin than I need to. And I, in fact, don't want to lock up any Bitcoin in theory, right? So I should be able to just really have a pay-per-use experience. The moment you lock up some funds, it's not pay-per-use experience anymore. And Nostr Wallet Connect allows us to really create these pay-per-use experiences, pay-per-click experiences, all the way. And so I think it can apply to the way AI APIs and AIs communicate between one another through these endpoints. I think, and this is kind of a recurring theme that we've heard a lot in the Bitcoin space, that Lightning is going to be, and so Bitcoin through Lightning is going to be the money of AI agents. I think this is true because there is no more efficient payment network out there that allows for such small transactions. But I think it's true also for advertisements. We created a proof of concept last year that allowed for a direct pay-per-click, literal pay-per-click. Unlike today where you go on Google Ads or any of such alternatives and you have to pay directly. So again, you kind of set the budget, but you prepay it, and then little by little, it's going to be charged for supposedly clicks. You just see dashboards that are communicated to you. Well, what we had built is essentially a literal pay-per-click, where you connect your wallet through Nostr Wallet Connect, and you authorize a certain budget, but you don't pay for anything. There's a maximum amount that you will commit for this ad campaign that you have, but it will only be charged when there are actual clicks, right? Which is the right way of doing it, and making sure that, again, there's no intermediaries in the payments and no one is there to take your funds when they shouldn't. And, you know, I think this one is a really big one. I have a personal story that maybe I told you guys. So the first thing I did in Bitcoin was a Bitcoin documentary, right? It's on YouTube, The Great Reset and the Rise of Bitcoin. And so it buzzed quite a bit, and so very quickly I was able to monetize the channel, which as soon as I could, I did. For this, you need, I think, about 3,500 followers, and maybe 150,000 views, something like that, 200,000 views. And so I monetized, and I had to wait for a certain threshold before I could withdraw it. Great, that's already, you know, it shows what the limits of certain custodians and intermediaries are. And the moment I wanted to withdraw these funds, I wasn't allowed to. Google blocked me. They shadow banned my channel. They locked my account. I couldn't monetize anymore. And essentially, it took 3 months of back and forth between Google Pay and YouTube saying it's their fault. No, it's their fault. No, it's their fault. And impossible for me to get my funds back. And I think, you know, that's the kind of things where had I been paid directly to my wallet, there would be no problem. I wouldn't have any problem with my channel and with YouTube at all. And so, you know, that's the kind of problems that I think can be solved directly thanks to these microtransaction, pay-per-clicks, direct debit environment, while YouTube could still earn because they could still trigger payments from my wallet directly. Right? So I think these are the kind of use cases that are completely new and that we're going to see moving forward. But, you know, it's going to take a bit of time, of course. Bitcoin has to properly become the standard internet money between developers. I think this is essentially what needs to happen. Developers that are not from the Bitcoin space to also adopt it, and then they will start using it and how they pay each other.
Hi, guys. Hope you're enjoying the podcast with Pierre. It was a great one. Just wanted to share a quick word from Onramp about our private client services. A lot of clients come to us with significant balances, and they're hoping to get a white glove treatment, whether it's via our onboarding process, helping and moving assets from a collaborative custody or single hardware device or a third-party exchange like a Coinbase. We support with all of that and much more, whether it's a virtual family office, access to private equity in the Bitcoin space via our fund early riders, and also the Guild Network, which really brings together world-class professionals globally that are looking to either collaborate, build companies in the space, advise companies, or just share professional experience as it relates to this new monetary order that's being shaped before us. If you'd like to learn about any of that, you can reach out to me at michael@onrampbitcoin.com, or if you want to reach out to the group at hello@onrampbitcoin.com. Now back to the rest of the show.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think slight pivot from this, but I think another theme of, you know, if we just think about the conference and sort of all the activity and adoption that's been occurring recently, there's been a lot of talk about stablecoins. I think the last time that we had you on the show, Pierre, we were talking about Tether had just announced that they were going to bring Tether to the Lightning Network. I'm curious to get your thoughts, updated thoughts on one, sort of like user proclivity to use stablecoins instead of like actually spending sats, and where you see that sort of evolving or developing as Tether in particular gets more involved on the Bitcoin and Lightning side, and also just general thoughts on what were the conversations from last week around people building around stablecoins as opposed to just building around sats and Bitcoin.
Pierre, before you jump in, we have about 30 minutes, and like I don't know where Brian else wants to go and Liam, but I've been fascinated recently about the stablecoin proliferation, and I know you had a background in your consulting days and looking at flow of funds and interchange. So if you need to start from the top, just curious in general, like your thoughts around stablecoins, how they fit into this global landscape. And, if you want to jump directly to Brian, but we can spend some time here because I do think there's a lot to cover. We're seeing a lot happening in the banking system in the US and then also globally to touch on. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah. So, generally speaking, I think stablecoins they're a great bridge for people to get into this space because you can allow people to interact with US dollar equivalent stablecoins. I'm thinking mostly US dollar because there are some other stablecoins, but I don't know. They're not really used that much. It's there isn't the same liquidity. So I think USDT is what matters, USDC as well, but mostly USDT is kind of the gold standard of stablecoins. And I think, they're great to bridge the gap that exists between the traditional world and the Bitcoin world. And their utility is essentially what we're seeing, right? A lot of third world countries, they want USDT because it allows them to save in dollars, which is the currency everyone wants to save in, as opposed to, every other currency losing value faster than the US dollar because these are the general dynamics. So everyone wants US dollar. Not everyone can get US dollar, but everyone can get USDT. And I think this is very, very interesting. So being able to see this environment grow is very important. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, of course, the fact that holding USDT is not holding Bitcoin. And sure, the US dollar loses value slower than any other currency, but it still loses value. And holding Bitcoin, if someone is thinking more long term, is kind of the approach. I think that makes more sense. And when it comes to also bringing this into the Lightning Network, it's the most efficient payment network, the most private, and that is really growing in the Bitcoin space. Anything can be added now to Bitcoin. Anything can be added to the Lightning Network thanks to Taproot assets. Now, Tether, sure, they're announcing and re-announcing and re-announcing. That's when will it come out? I'm not quite sure. Hopefully pretty soon. I think, maybe they're trying to align this with some of their other investments as well. Like, they put a bunch of money inside of Rumble recently, and they are announcing their wallet that will be both Bitcoin and USDT wallet. So I don't know. Maybe they're waiting to make sure that the use case can be integrated there directly to make it boom. But I welcome it, to be honest. I think it's a good move because it will simplify the onboarding to Bitcoin as well on the most efficient payment network that exists right now in the world. So I think it's just interesting to see, and interesting to see how their entire model is going to work compared to sending Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, because there is the concept of liquidity on the Lightning Network where all the nodes where these payments they hop through, they need to have the liquidity of the transaction that is going through the node. How is this going to work with USDT? Because no node currently has USDT on Lightning. So is every single node going to have to also add this in order to be able to be a node that routes these payments? I don't know. Maybe they're going to use sats underneath to be able to pay for the routing of these payments, but then problems, I think user experience problems might come into play where, if you've ever made a transaction on any other blockchain that uses USDT. So for example, I tried paying once developer in USDT over Tron because Tron is the cheapest network right now to pay through USDT. Well, it's a bit of a pain because sure, one thing is to have USDT and you can make this transaction, but in order to be able to do it, well, you need to actually have Tron. I do not care for Tron at all. So, I'm okay buying the USDT on Tron to send it, but just buying Tron in order to be able to make this transaction is very, very painful. And, for people that just want to be able to spend in USDT, if they face the same user experience problem because all of a sudden they need to have USDT and they need to have Bitcoin, it means that they need to also go buy Bitcoin when they might not care about it, right? So, the question is, is this something that will be solved by the USDT routing of payments, or will it be solved by the nodes themselves and how they route these payments? That's the kind of question that I still didn't get an answer to, because, we didn't have let's say mainnet, so production ready version of USDT transactions over the Lightning Network. So question mark there, to be honest. But I think it's pretty exciting, especially that what I feel is missing in the world of USDT payments, and we're facing this at Flash as well. So our wallet is using the Liquid network, and it means that there's a bunch of assets that are available on Liquid. I don't care for most of them, but there is USDT. And that's cool because, we could offer already today, and we wanted to offer USDT balances and support directly inside of Flash. But the issue is that who uses USDT on Liquids? No one, literally, right? And so then, in order for us to allow merchants to be able to accept payments in USDT this way, well, then it means that we would need to allow for the conversion from different USDT from other blockchains into USDT on Liquid. But then, how do you do that without introducing custodial solutions, which we are trying to stay away completely? Because there are solutions out there like SideShift. SideShift is great, very well integrated with the Liquid network as well, and we'd be able to do that. But they are temporarily holding user funds, and I think could be categorized in the future as money transmitters, and it would put at risk our entire platform, and users that do not interact with it at all, do not care, they would also have to KYC through us, which is what we're trying to stay away from. And I think stablecoin on Lightning maybe could be the opportunity to simplify this, because just like Lightning, I think is going to grow as being the payment network that links all of the different Bitcoin networks, because they all have their benefits, right? On-chain is the ultimate that you want to be able to use. Liquid, I think, is great in order to be able to start with a zero balance. And Lightning is a great solution for instant payments, but also to swap in full atomic swap. So again, no custodials in these kind of interactions. Directly from one network to the other, Lightning being at the heart of it. So, is there potential for stablecoins on Lightning to solve this problem between the lack of interoperability of all of these chains? I think the potential is there, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's two aspects. When I think about stablecoins, I think of, and maybe for this topic, we focus on like the individual and peer-to-peer. I think there's the other version, which is B2B, and the opportunity that the Stripes and large companies are after, and they're not going to be transacting on Lightning or Tron for, I guess, TBD what that looks like. But I don't know if I've ever heard, and I'm curious, like Liam and Brian, if you have heard a good, because even Liam, I'm sorry, Pierre, you sharing like, if there's a great reason to put stable coins on Lightning and like where that goes. The best I had heard was ultimately the state between both nodes not having to go back to the blockchain. If you're using it for like AI agents and you're having like Tether, like in dollars, be able to be used, and it's gonna be so fast that you're not gonna want to settle on a Tron or whatever. That's like what I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not. This is like above my pay grade. The thing that I will share that kind of doesn't make sense is like, is this notion of inflation and people want stables versus Bitcoin's volatility. It's like, Bitcoin's volatility is pretty much in your favor. And if it's against you, well, it's in the relative or context to what's it against you in your local currency, right? And so it's more of like, if you just obfuscate that it's Bitcoin you're holding, and so you have a US dollar price and then the number of sats, why aren't people just holding sats? Because the thing that I didn't mention is the counterparty risk. of the other stablecoin you have, whether it's the blockchain or the, whoever's holding the stablecoin or issuing it. So all that gets bypassed. It almost feels like just like an education thing where people are just like, why am I holding stables versus just buying the sats and then being done with it and reducing all of that. And that's a much global liquid network.
Well, there are two things there that I think are worth pointing out. One is the privacy of the Lightning Network versus the other chains. And, it's interesting to see Palmer Luckey invested in a different stablecoin that has no product market fit. Like all these defense guys just understand that like the flow of capital and like understanding the data of every user is definitely something that's of strategic importance, especially for, a stablecoin issuer that's going to be buying US treasuries. And then number two, with respect to, just holding sats versus USDT, I completely agree. But I've also, been in Bitcoin for a little bit of time, understand this deeply. Most people are they're very risk averse and think that, Bitcoin just is way too volatile for them. I understand definitely the, working capital needing at least some amount of USDT if you're in one of these countries where you have, specific costs that you need to meet every month, and Bitcoin could potentially be too volatile. But yeah, every time you have excess savings, it just makes sense to automatically sweep them into Bitcoin as long as you have enough capital that you can meet your working capital needs. I think that there's just so much education that needs to be done, and a lot of this is just like focused on the US where we have a bunch of savings, but in the emerging countries where this isn't necessarily or there's not quite as much education, but there's more demand for these stable coins. It's just not quite there yet.
Yeah, those are good points that like I didn't, discounted that Tether has a global brand like the dollar now. And so you're much more likely to trust Tether than to trust Bitcoin if you're in an emerging market for a lot of people. And so then if businesses are holding larger amounts of treasury balances, and then the other side of that, I didn't even think about that from the Anduril side, but that makes sense that there's just like Orwellian, we saw Palantir and Trump or whatever this past weekend, like these guys, if they want to see into how the flow of funds are happening, that's an interesting dynamic when it comes to USDT over Lightning versus over like on a blockchain.
Yeah, 100%. So go ahead, Pierre.
Yeah, so again, that's supposedly, right? Because we don't exactly know how this is going to work, right? And so supposedly will be just as private for USDT over Lightning as Bitcoin is over Lightning. But we don't know that yet. That's kind of the thing. Because, there is also regulation around stablecoins coming to the US, and that's a big question as to how this will be handled, and how this actually, because there will be always privacy in how the routing of these payments happen over the Lightning network, but it won't be sats moving around the Lightning network. The Lightning network will be the communication layer to forward these transactions. So we still need to see exactly what does it look like in terms of privacy at the whoever is initiating the transaction and whoever is receiving this transaction. And I don't know this yet, but
that makes sense. It's like Tor. It's whoever the nodes are that are, if you're coming in and out, are where you're going to have the vulnerabilities. And it's pretty much going to be like Tether running the nodes.
Yeah, essentially, right?
Our agencies that just, are looking to understand.
I think at this point, they're pretty much the same. So we're good there.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I know that there is, of course, a lot of work that is being done in the Lightning space, but that's where I don't know how this applies to USDT, but there is a lot of work being done in the Lightning world to make sure that more privacy is added than what currently exists. The goal being that the routing nodes don't know who is the end recipient and who sent this Bitcoin originally. They just know who came before and who the funds are going to after. So this is great. If a similar model can work in USDT, well then, I think we'll be good. But again, it's not sats flowing over Lightning. It's USDT flowing over Lightning. So I suspect it'll work in its own way with Tether at the middle of it.
The beauty of all this is like, and I think we all directionally agree, like the cat's out of the bag. It reminds me of the internet, right? The internet's out, free information will flow. And so I think that's why I get excited or I think about stablecoins is it's just a gateway. We saw like a small example with Tether and Bitcoin and the pair and what it allowed people to get into BTC. That now this is becoming, again, it's very Orwellian, but it's also opening up the aperture of the average individual that money is digital. And so the thing we didn't touch on here is like if somebody's coming in digital, then they can get into Lightning. Well, then it goes back to the eCash component. And if you have all these different aspects that are starting to tie together, because the cat's out of the bag when it comes to stable getting access to Bitcoin in the same way of Lightning getting access to eCash or a proxy dollar, like entrepreneurs are going to figure it out because the common thing you mentioned, the Genius Act, is the banks and giving yield back. And like they don't historically do that. And that's like a thing that they're trying to put in or keep out. But it's like this reality that we live in a global market. So somebody's going to find somewhere to give you back a percentage. And that's where free competition comes in. It's this, it kind of ties into the Tether and like you're going to back your stable coin with BTC because it's the pragmatic thing to do if you're going to, rely on it to hold your dollar peg. And so that free market example is similar. It's going to come over to Lightning and eCash, and somebody's going to figure out a way to keep a static dollar. They're going to have credibility. And then part of that is going to be privacy baked in. And then that's where we're at. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, and we don't exactly know what it's going to look like at this stage. But I mean, I think I'm quite hopeful. I guess maybe naive, but hoping that it's only going to bring more adoption to the Lightning Network and more liquidity as well, right? Because of course it's in Tether's interest to make sure that the Lightning Network is more used. And actually I think it's pretty interesting when we're talking about yield and all of these different elements when, you mentioned earlier, Brian, the announcement that Square made about exactly 9.7 yearly yield on the transaction fees they take on the Lightning Network. I mean, to be honest, I was shocked when I heard that. Isn't this so much cooler as a strategic Bitcoin reserve strategy than just holding it on some, wallets and sleeping? Like, at least it can be put to use directly on the Lightning Network, generate yield while, being secure and locked up in multi-sig contracts for you. I think that's pretty cool. There's something
maybe
there.
For folks who don't understand what I have on the screen here, can you break down like kind of what this means and why it is sort of an important step in the progress of Lightning Network generally?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, Cash App is integrated with the Lightning Network, and they get quite a few transactions on the Lightning Network. Now, for the Lightning Network to work, again, there's different nodes, and transactions just hop from node to node until they reach their destination. You don't know how many nodes it might go through. It depends on the node itself that you're connected to, and so on. And so, what nodes need is liquidity, because when a payment goes through your node, you need to have the same amount that you're receiving to be able to forward it. And then when the transaction is settled, well, then all of this liquidity gets settled backwards as well. It all happens pretty much instantly, so it's very, very simple, but every node needs this liquidity. Now, Cash App, they have 184 Bitcoin that is locked in the Lightning Network. It's multi-sig contract, so it's Bitcoin that is on-chain, that is just locked with a multi-sig contract, so that this Bitcoin is essentially available through the Lightning Network, and it avoids the double spending problem. And essentially, for each single transaction that is routed, nodes, and that's optional, in fact, in how you set up your node, but you can take a fee for routing this transaction, and it's just a few sats, or depending on the node, the price can go up. You can set it however you want. And so Cash App, obviously, they're taking a fee, and this fee means that because their Bitcoin is locked up in this multi-sig contract, so it's available in the Lightning Network, whenever a transaction happens, their liquidity is being used. Therefore, they take a fee for the usage of this liquidity, and it allows them to earn 9.7% on the Bitcoin that is locked up, which is pretty crazy because, what kind of instruments give you 9.7%? And in theory, this number can only grow over time if they keep on increasing the amount of transactions that happen on their nodes and the amount of liquidity that they have through it. So I think it's just very interesting because rather than the strategic Bitcoin reserves where people just lock up Bitcoin on, an on-chain address, well, instead they can lock it up and give access to more liquidity on the Lightning Network and get a really nice yield along the way. So I think that was one of the most mind-blowing facts that came out of the conference for me last week.
No, I totally agree. And so on this chart, as you referenced, it's the 9.7 for the routing node. And then below that are Sky savings rate, which I believe is just a high interest savings account at 8.1, USDC on Aave at 4.2, which is DeFi platform, federal funds rate 4.1, and then ETH staking below that. So yeah, it's pretty remarkable that this is outpacing other forms of yield. Importantly, without any sort of lending or rehypothecation to generate that yield. So yeah, super fascinating.
This reminds me a little bit of it's definitely not apples to apples, but if we were looking back at either like search with Google or like hosting services like via AWS, in the sense that this is only going to proliferate because there's a notion of like, I don't even know how real because they've been working on this stuff for a while, but like Amboss and whatever AI deal to help and route. But there's a notion of, well, that's going to compress and, Square is just closest to the money and they route, so they have it high. But it's actually the opposite. It goes back to the whole Jevons paradox. And like the more utility and use is going to drive more. And like ultimately, I think it comes back to this notion. It's interesting that the Square guys like do a lot of stuff, but whoever's in that circle, they also have like really bad takes because I think they're on the against Sats versus like the Bitcoin or whatever. And it's like the notion of very few people are going to start to interact with Bitcoins. They're going to interact with Satoshis and Sats. And this proliferation of Lightning is going to help with that, whether it's exchanges built on Lightning or eCash or how we like peer-to-peer via media, advertising. And Sats are just going to be natural, just how cents were. But then this angle is everyone can potentially, going back to the AWS or Google, like anybody can become a routing node and can invest heavily there and start to like park capital, especially if they're close to financial services. And so that's just a point of like, as we get more demand and interest for Bitcoin and Lightning on other layers, this is just going to actually grow. And then that's where that kind of quote unquote risk-free rate of return comes in. Nothing's risk-free, right? People are going to blow up because they're going to just like mess up the nodes and infrastructure because that's possible. But it gets as close if you have reputable players setting up these channels that can return a rate of return.
Yeah. And so what I think is interesting is how is this at all actually going to apply to USDT on Lightning? And is it an opportunity for stablecoin issuers to also increase their yield directly by providing liquidity for these USDT transactions on Lightning? I have no idea, to be honest, because again, I don't have enough understanding on how exactly these payments are being routed. But that I think would be pretty interesting to see as well. Simply, the interest that could come for stablecoin issuers to also provide more liquidity on the Lightning Network, including in Bitcoin, in order to be able to make sure that all of these stablecoin payments are as efficient as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming Lightning Labs has something because I know we're kind of walking around in the dark here, but I feel like Lightning Labs and the implementation around these nodes has described some of like how because there's an implementation, right, that you would need to run. And then this is where it ties into like, what is your Lightning node route outside of just Bitcoin? And is it, Tether? Is it real world assets? And what does that look like? And then how are you incentivized? I think you still need the adoption of that.
Yeah.
Well, all very fascinating.
Liam. Were you going to go somewhere, Liam?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
All right. Well, we a little over an hour here, maybe a good place to wrap. Where can people learn more about Flash, Pierre? Where should people download the beta wallet, etc.?
Yeah. So, I mean, the easiest place to learn more is on our website, paywithflash.com. From there, you can also access our wallet and join the beta testers. Of course, also follow us on Twitter. You can find us also easily from our website. In fact, I recommend following me as well because I talk a lot about the stuff that we do. And generally speaking, Yeah, we're pretty excited about what's coming at Flash. Last week actually we were the payment processor for the Bitcoin Film Fest in Warsaw, and so we had a bunch of use cases. Well, we're gonna have quite a bit of content coming out regarding that because our point of sale was used, our plugins were used, our store. There was just a lot of stuff there, so we're pretty excited about it. And and a lot coming in the following weeks. Of course, invoicing tool for free. We're gonna have on-chain payment support and our wallet fully released as well. So yeah, pretty excited for what's coming at Flash.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would encourage if anybody's individual or business that just wants to test it out or needs to accept Bitcoin and wants to spin up an invoice, it's really robust tooling, easy to get set up. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, and you can also just write to me directly, pierre.corbin@paywithflash.com if you have feedback or need help getting started. Happy to support everyone.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for joining, Pierre. Always fun to chat, and lots to look forward to.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thanks, gents. Later.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Final Settlement. We had an awesome episode with Pierre Corbin, co-founder and CEO of Flash. We touched on the Bitcoin 2025 conference, some of the announcements that were made, and then how they relate to his business Flash and what they're seeing on the merchant and cross-border payments flows. Quick word from Onramp. As you all may know, we are the trusted Bitcoin partner for Bitcoin holders that are looking to secure generational wealth. I have it pulled up here if you're listening on the pod, an Onramp dashboard basically showing some of the easy examples of how folks use this today, whether it's seamless setting up inheritance for multiple beneficiaries or being able to buy and sell Bitcoin through the dashboard, and then ultimately the multi-institution vault, which is what underpins everything at Onramp. Again, multi-institution, multiple institutions that are regulated, working on behalf of the client to protect their assets. The key concept here is that each institution works on behalf of the client, not Onramp, to move funds, requiring multiple permissions, including video verifications with multiple institutions. That all comes with a $100 million warranty insurance by Lloyd's of London. If you'd like to learn more, I'd encourage you to schedule a consultation or reach out directly. We have some really interesting ways we're onboarding folks. And if you're just not ready for multi-institution custody, I would encourage you to check out Onramp Trade, which has no fees for trading until October. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com. Look forward to speaking with you and hope you enjoy the show.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. If you found the information valuable, please share the episode with a friend or leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. All the links we discussed in today's show will be in the show notes inside your podcast app. Before we finish, a quick reminder that Onramp Media is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment or legal advice. Regardless of where you are on your Bitcoin journey, we'd love to hear from you. Visit onrampbitcoin.com/contact to schedule a consultation with one of our private client advisors.